Not one, not two, not three, but four women were busted at the Pinellas County Jail up the road from me this week for introduction and possession of contraband, methamphetamines, and cocaine. This story continues, folks. It continues over and over and over in a never-ending cycle. Why? Well, we're going to talk about that because it all starts where? With the manipulator, the inmates. The inmates are manipulators, and it all begins there. Now, that does not make it right for visitors to smuggle drugs in. That's on them. Doesn't make it right for a prison staff employee to smuggle drugs into prison. That's on them. But it does start with the manipulation. The inmates are masters at this game, and they will manipulate the weak-minded. Also, in Georgia this week, a great drug bust. They got a ton of stuff this week. Another good job by Georgia. You know, I've seen this in the past year on the Georgia Department of Corrections website. They are really catching a lot of contraband. It's a tough job catching this contraband coming in, and we have a never-ending cycle of people who want to continue to supply drugs to inmates. Well, if they're that stupid and that dumb, and they want to give up their freedom to smuggle drugs in prison, we will continue to catch you. We will continue to give you a home in the jail, and hopefully later on in the prison after you're convicted of introduction of contraband into a correctional facility. Now, for all of you hard-working, honest people out there, let's talk about these dummies who continue to attempt to smuggle drugs in. Some of them do get them in. The case in Pinellas County started with a person on the street. She was busted, and that led the Pinellas County detectives into the jail, where they actually found a couple of inmates with some drugs on them. You know, investigations in the jails and prisons always seem to tumble, I call it. I would get one investigation of someone smuggling drugs in. If we were successful at catching that person, it seemed to lead to another, and then another, and then another. And that's the case of these four women here. And on the streets, it's the same thing. You catch one person in a drug ring, and you end up with 50 or more, as in this photo here, from the Polk County Sheriff's Office in one of their good drug busts. So it's a never-ending cycle. I know what you're going to say already. We're never going to get rid of it, but let's put a big dent in it. Let's slow it down, and let's try to educate those not to get manipulated. We have a lot of honest officers that sometimes fall into a trap. You got to keep your mind strong, and you got to remember, anything the inmates want to do for you, there is a reason behind that, folks. They want you to do something for them later. Don't get involved in the inmate manipulation game. The inmate wants you to respect him or her, as in this photo of a slide I use on one of my presentations. The inmate wants you to forget that he or she is incarcerated, and they want you to believe they are your buddy, your friend, your pal, a human being just like you. Well, they are a human being just like you, except there's one problem. They've committed a crime, and in many cases, many crimes, and they want something. They want something from you. Okay? You're the staff, you're the officer in front of them, or you're the prison employee in front of them, the drug counselor, the teacher, the GED teacher. They're going to try to get something, folks. Be ready for them, please. Now, inmates and their visitors smuggle drugs and other contraband into prisons, as I said, is a never-ending problem, as in this slide that I also use on one of my presentations. The inmates are the main cause of corruption. Did you hear that? The inmates are the main cause of corruption. Yes, we have some bad apples. We catch some staff members sometimes bringing contraband in. That is a few, folks, that make the good, honest, hard-working officers look bad. So a lot of people that aren't in corrections are going to say, the inmates are the cause of corruption. Well, you darn staff members, you're all the corrupt people. Well, folks, when it comes to drug smuggling, my topic today, drug and contraband smuggling, the inmates are the main cause of corruption. Why? Because who are the drugs and contraband going to? The inmates. What are the inmates doing to get these drugs and contraband? They're manipulating either you, the prison employee, or a family member or friend. Or if they're in a gang, their gang members aren't being manipulated. They're trying their best to manipulate someone to be the middle party to get the drugs to their gang member in prison. Inmates know how to manipulate weak staff members. We know this, so why can't we stop it? We've known this for decades. Nothing new that I just told you. Why can't we stop it? Well, we as fellow officers have to watch our brothers and sisters and catch them when they look like they're going to fall in the trap. We as supervisors have to know what to look for and watch an officer that might be dirty or a prison staff member that might be dirty. We cannot just sit in our little offices as supervisors, do our paperwork and nothing else. We cannot be just paper pushers. We must be supervisors. We must be leaders, not a boss. Now, a boss tells everybody what to do, and a leader shows everybody what to do, how to do it, and keeps care of their people. Remember that. Be a leader, not a boss, folks. The inmate traps that they set, we must be trained on how to detect them and watch for them, and we must get our officers and prison staff members up to date with the games inmates play. Yes, I stole that from a book. That's a good book, Games Inmates Play. Sometimes we see people accepting bribes from inmates for sexual favors, smuggling drugs, weapons, cell phones to inmates. Well, now we've gone pretty much past the manipulation to loving the inmates. Now, that officer could have been, or that prison staff member could have been manipulated as well. But if you start having sex with inmates, that's where I draw the line. You're corrupt, then you need to go to prison. Felony charges, off to prison you go. In other cases, we have found, and it's not good to hear, we don't want to hear it, but we've heard administration cover up officers to protect the agency from embarrassment, to protect the agency from lawsuits from inmates. In the end, cover-ups don't work. There's a great prison story from Charlotte Correctional Institution in my book, Corruption Behind Bars, that gives you a fine example of the administration trying to cover up all this kind of stuff. Listen, who cares? It's going to come out in the news sooner or later anyway. Put an end to it now. Don't try to save yourself embarrassment by covering up anything going on within your prison or jail. It won't work. It never has. It never will. It's an old-time thing about trying to cover up for your staff, and it just never works. You always lose in the end. Okay? Now, is your career or freedom worth a few dollars? Another slide I use. What would you do if you saw this taking place in your jail? It's up here above me, next to my head. This is an officer giving drugs to inmates and receiving money for the drugs. What would you do? Well, God, it should be very simple. Bust that officer right now. Bust them. They're getting money in exchange for drugs. Bust them. Call your supervisor immediately. Do whatever it takes, however your agency's policy and procedure dictates, and have them arrested and taken away. Investigation to be completed, felony charges to be filed, and in the case of Florida, a report to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and let's get this officer's certification revoked for life so they can never ever have a chance to be a correctional officer again. We now have NCIC National Crime Information Center, where we can connect very easily with each other in all 50 states to find out who we do not want to hire. Okay? What would you do if you saw this taking place? If you even hesitated, well, I don't know if it's my friend, I don't know, maybe I'll talk to him. Wow. You can't do that, folks. It'd be wrong. If you let this slide, you're just as guilty as that officer handing over those drugs in this photo. Okay? Do not find yourself in a professional compliance bulletin. This is another slide I use up here. When you commit a crime, you end up in a professional compliance bulletin as an example for everyone to see, which is good. I think you should be an example. And I think you need to go to jail or prison for doing any of that. Okay? Now, back to our visitors. We must be vigilant and continue to watch our visitors. They want to tell you that it's the staff members at the prison doing all this drug introduction and doing everything. Well, folks, every single week I can show you a jail or a prison that has visitors caught smuggling drugs in. Don't let them try to fool you, because guess what those visitors are trying to do? They're trying to manipulate the system, manipulate the news media to make it look like it's all prison staff doing it. No, it's not, folks. Visitors are always, not all visitors, same as with officers. There are tons and hundreds of thousands of visitors that would never even think about smuggling drugs in. But then, just like the few bad apples we have, there's bad apples that come to visitation. And they are paid a handsome price to smuggle drugs in as well. Some of them are manipulated by their boyfriends or their husbands to bring it in, and they get caught free of charge and on the house because they didn't get paid a penny for smuggling. They just did it because they love their boyfriend or girlfriend in jail, or they love their boyfriend or girlfriend in prison, and they got one free on the house trip to the jail themselves. These visitors in Pinellas bonded out on a $7,000 bond, I believe, but now they'll be facing criminal charges, and I sure hope they get some jail or prison time out of that. Anyway, folks, just trying to get the info out there. I have a presentation that's about 75 minutes long that I've done in a couple of states. Here in Florida for one, Tennessee was another, and I go around and speak on drug smuggling and corruption within the prison and jails. Please help each other out, keep each other out of trouble, and let's continue to catch those visitors smuggling drugs in and put them behind bars where they belong. Thank you, Gary York, True Prison Stories. Please subscribe.